Warning: Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
California's rugged and scenic northwestern corner is the beginning of the great Pacific Northwest. A region of untamed and primitive beauty.
And the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department has now joined efforts with the Arcata Police.
Growers living off the grid. Humboldt County also has the highest rate of missing person cases in the state. Where 60% of marijuana is grown in the United States.
There's a lot of evil here. A lot of evil.
This is Kinda Murdery, and you're entering the Emerald Triangle. Wow, that was nuts. So this season we're going to be talking about a place that's very special to me. It's in the northwest corner of California, and it's called the Emerald Triangle because the three counties that make up the triangle, which are Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity, produce 60% of the marijuana in the United States every year. But there's more up there than pot. There's timber, there's dairy, there's oyster and crab fisheries. Heck, there's my family. I was born and raised in Humboldt County, an hour from the nearest town, off the power grid, all wood heating, wood cooking, solar and water power. And just like marijuana is not the only economic engine in the triangle, it's also not the only source of criminal activity. The region's largest city of Eureka has the highest property crime rate per capita in the whole state. Meth is rampaging all over the place. In fact, locals call Eureka Yatweka. As for Humboldt, with or without the angry screeds of local newspapermen, it has the highest missing persons rate in the entire state, nearly double California's average. But look, it's not all darkness, of course. It's a quiet place of stunning natural beauty, towering redwoods, and what I believe to be the most beautiful coastline in the world. And to be honest with you, not to just be sensationalist on a show called Kinda Murdery, I never once felt physically unsafe growing up. Except for that time a mountain lion walked up our driveway when I was 5, and when I was getting my ass beat daily by the local bully in middle school. Other than that, totally safe place to grow up. But this show is called Kinda Murdery, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that violent stories are everywhere. Anywhere you walk, you're walking on about 2 feet of dirt above a whole bunch of dead bodies. It's just a fact. Violent stories are everywhere. And sometimes the stories of the Emerald Triangle, like the dark forest loam from which they spring, can be a little darker than the sunlit Mojave Fair from last season. But not today. Today's not dark, today's not heavy. Today we're going to be talking about sheep. And specifically, just how murdery a business sheep farming can be. Sheep farming, that is, in Trinity County near the town of Weaverville in the 1880s. Let's talk about Weaverville for a second. Weaverville's on the 299 freeway between Eureka and Redding, a town built in 1850 in the foothills of the heavily forested Trinity Alps. It was born of the gold rush, and it still features something that's damn near impossible to find in earthquake country. Brick buildings. Weaverville looks like a wooden boardwalk, deadwood of the redwoods, a Hollywood set piece from an old cowboy movie, sprinkled with architectural standouts from other decades. Weaverville, where the 1850s meet the 1950s, the 1970s, and today. While at the height of the gold rush, Weaverville was home to over 2,000 Chinese immigrants and featured its own Chinatown. But this is not a gold rush story. You see, the gold rush was over by 1858, and by the mid-1880s, Weaverville was sheep farming country. Which kicks off our first story. Here's the top line. In 1886, all the shepherds in the Mad River region of Trinity County, that's near Weaverville, banded together to try to stop one Norwegian named Erickson from stealing their sheep. And you'd think this Erickson must be quite the Viking monster if all his fellow shepherds needed to work together to stop his lanolin larceny. At least that's what I thought. But what if I told you that Erickson wasn't a bad guy at all? He was a good guy. In fact, he was too good a guy. And that all those Mad River sheep men worked for none other than the honest-to-God Don of Northern California, a merciless crime boss and logger baron known as the King of Round Valley. That's right. It all happened, for reals. And we're going to unpack it in an Aesop's fable called The Contract Killer and the Sheep Farmer. But before we get into it, I got to introduce you to my guest today. I am here with Nick Viau from the Traditional Outdoors podcast. Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Good, Zevon. Love the show. Happy to be on here, man.
Who better to join me on the first episode to talk about crazy shit happening in the wilderness than a traditional outdoors hunting expert like yourself? Thanks for being here.
I would use the term expert loosely there, but I have bumbled around the woods quite a bit.
Here's what's going to happen today. I'm going to tell you all a story, and then Nick's going to tell you guys a story, and then I'm going to tell you one more. Now, my first story, it's kind of a modern Aesop's fable, if you will. Now, when I say modern, I'm talking 1886, still a long time after Aesop, but this is called The Contract Killer and the Sheep Farmer. So here's the thing, and you might not think it, but sheep farming is a cutthroat business. A big piece of the story of the Old West revolves around these vicious range wars between cattlemen and sheep farmers. You know, sheep farmer puts up a fence, cattleman takes down the fence so he can drive his cattle through, and the sheep farmer's like, "You asshole, you destroyed this fence I built," and tensions escalate, and next thing you know, everybody's shooting at each other, right? Well, it turns out that at least in the Mad River region of Trinity County, which is outside of the town of Weaverville off the 299, San Francisco Examiner said of the Mad River district, they said it's worthy of the name Mad, calling it the most lawless community in the West, outranking even that of the Bold Country where moonshiners hold forth. And when a murder occurred there, it was given only passing notice. So that's how blood-soaked and crazy this part of the Emerald Triangle was back in the 1880s.
Over sheep and cattle.
Yeah, over sheep and cattle, and, you know, years before, it was Gold Country as well. So here we have the story of a murdered sheep farmer and the dim-witted contract killer who was hired by what I'm going to call, and I think it's accurate, a cabal of rival sheep farmers to do him in. That's right. We got John Wick gets paid in gold to take down a sheep farmer in the Pacific Northwest, and you think I'm lying, but I'm not. Now, as I looked into this story, Nick, I came away with some rules about sheep farming in Trinity County in the 1880s. Okay, so here we go. Usually, I'm gonna have a lot of a lot of sympathy. That's a Freudian slip right there as COVID rages through the nation. Usually, I'm gonna have a lot of symptoms. Oh man, but usually I'm gonna have a lot of sympathy for a murder victim, right? But I also have a rule, and this is what I'm going to call my first rule, which is, if you say to yourself, either I'm the asshole or everybody else is, probably you're the asshole. Okay? Now that's my first top-line takeaway from this story. Second rule, if you're trying to figure out the name of a sheep farmer, don't worry about it. Just call him George. Let me tell you why. Okay, you see, the guy who was hired to kill this sheep farmer was named George. The guy who was actually convicted of killing the sheep farmer, different guy than the contract killer, also named George. The guy who owned the house where they all conspired, this cabal, to kill the sheep farmer, he was named George. And the sheep farmer who was murdered, also George.
So this is like the cabal of George.
And so if you ever meet a sheep farmer, don't even ask him his name. Just call him George. He'll probably be impressed as hell. Or maybe he'll think you're a witch.
I've just always wondered, how does one start a cabal? At what point
that's a good question. I think of a cabal as a group of influential people who like meet up to conspire to make something nefarious happen. So sure, maybe it's the Carlisle group or it's Skull and Bones, but in this case, it was a bunch of backwoods sheep farmers, and that's what we're going to be talking about today as soon as I finish with my other 2 rules. Rule number 3, sheep farmers can't keep a secret. And rule number 4, if Mary had a little lamb in Trinity County in the 1880s, everywhere that Mary went, she better watch her fucking back.
It's not much of a cabal if you can't keep a secret. What are the rules of this cabal?
Well, there are different levels of cabal competence, right?
I mean, it's just a social club at that point, isn't it? A social club of people doing
Well, at the end of the
shit.
day, sort of, aren't they all? I mean, gosh, how much of the fate of the world's decided on a golf course? I mean, none of us really know, I guess. So let's break it down. Murdered man's name is George Erickson. He's shot in the back while leading his herd of sheep through the mountains early September, around September 7th in 1886. But this whole story goes back way before that. And we're going to pick it up right in the middle of this sort of endless legal and extra-legal tug-of-war between George Erickson, the murdered man, as well as another sheep farmer named Benjamin Arthur and the rest of the members of what we're going to call the Mad River Shepherds Cabal. So here's what kept happening when I say tug-of-war. Basically, it would go like this. Benjamin Arthur, I'll call him B. Arthur, don't fuck with the Golden Girls. He would go out and he would accuse Erickson of stealing his sheep, changing the brands, or shearing the sheep and selling the wool, which he referred to as grand larceny and sometimes extortion. And then back in those days, basically, we've all seen Westerns, right? What happens, Nick, when a cowboy calls another cowboy a liar?
They have a fight or they do
to the death, right? So
high noon shit.
So here's what's funny and very sort of legally inefficient about that sort of a culture. It basically means that anybody can go in and swear that anybody else did a crime, and then that person gets arrested. So if you don't have a good set of moral values, you can just kind of accuse anybody of anything based on nobody wanting to call you a liar, and then that poor person gets chucked in the clink and has to go through a court trial. And that is the sort of legal harassment that the Shepherds Cabal kept subjecting poor Mr. Erickson to. They would accuse him of stealing their sheep. He'd get chucked in prison. He'd go to court. The charges would get dismissed. Then he'd get out. He'd accuse one of them of stealing his sheep. And it would be wash, rinse, repeat. Oh, my gosh. So
Was there any like defamation of character back then, or slander, or lawsuits of that nature?
I don't know, actually. I'll have to talk to my 19th century frontier justice legal correspondent about that one and get back to you.
I'm wondering, and also I'd love to be in the room when these accusations are being made. This son of a bitch sheared my sheep.
Right. Literally, Benjamin Arthur tells exactly that story, that he caught Erickson shearing his sheep and that Erickson sold all the wool, and so that's the first time he has him arrested is for grand larceny, and he goes, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to run him in for extortion.
Notorious sheep shearer,
exactly.
George Erickson.
Yes, George Erickson. So, and of course, a lot of these things actually revolved around land disputes, where they would basically say, well, no, this is my land, and the other guy'd say, no, it's my land, and he'd say, well, these are my sheep because they're on my land, etc. So let's talk a little bit about the cabal of sheep farmers who conspired to have Erickson killed. Here were the guys. You had Benjamin Arthur, as I said, I called him B. Arthur. Then you had John Norris. You had a guy, and this has got to be the all-time best name for a sheep farmer, Winfield Lamb. Just let that one sink in for you a little bit.
Sounds like a stoner rock band.
Opening for Wilco, Winfield Lamb. Right. Then you have George Trogdon, and you had a guy named George Kuntz. And then there was George Orr, although George Orr was he was the man who was hired to kill Erickson. It's not clear that he was a sheep farmer so much, and in fact, in his testimony, he presents himself more as a half-wit patsy than as a rural John Wick. So here we are. It's June of 1885, some 16 months before the murder of Erickson, and John Norris, George Kuntz, and George Trogdon meet up at Trogdon's house, and Kuntz suggests to Norris that it could be worth $1,000 to Norris if Norris could succeed in getting Erickson to stop stealing sheep. Well, Norris likes the sound of a clean grand, so he does what I had talked about. He just immediately goes out. He swears a warrant against Erickson for altering brands and stealing sheep. And then George Kuntz takes that warrant into Weaverville. Kuntz has himself temporarily appointed as a deputy sheriff, and he goes and he arrests Erickson for stealing the sheep. Then Kuntz goes and gets Benjamin Arthur, and they all meet up at Trogdon's house again. And basically Arthur says to all the guys, like, look, here's what I'm going to do. He says, we're going to run him in for grand larceny. If that doesn't work, it's going to be extortion for selling the wool on my sheep. And then Winfield Lamb says, well, I want to get in on this. And he says to Trogdon, can you be my agent to go in and swear that Erickson's been stealing my sheep too? I mean, it's like... Oh my gosh, they call the NFL a copycat league. Well, apparently, framing your rival is a copycat business in the sheep herding cabals of Trinity County.
Well, okay, so what is the financial situation of this Erickson guy? If he's stealing everybody's sheep, then wouldn't he just be some kind of sheep monopoly person that has just like all this money?
That's what I'm wondering, like in one of my early rules there when I said, you usually feel bad for a murder victim, but if you think everybody else is the asshole, maybe you're the asshole. I'm going like, how much of sort of an unstoppable force of an inveterate sheep-shearing sheep thief must Erickson have been if all of the other sheep farmers in the region spent all of their time plotting to do whatever they could to throw something on the tracks of his, the locomotive of his larceny and shearing powers. That seemed to be.
And that's what I'm thinking too. I'm like, I kept thinking, well, where's this guy's friends then? Why doesn't he have his own cabal?
Right. Eric said he's got to be like Norwegian, right? So he's just this giant Viking berserker, and nobody's really willing to confront him directly, so they just keep hiding behind the sheriff. But I mean, yeah, for sure, you're on point there.
So I'm seeing this guy. I'm picturing Thor Gunderson from Hell on Wheels. Everybody just hates him.
Right. So I think you're on to something there. So basically, they get him thrown in jail, and then they meet up. Benjamin Arthur says, if the law can't stop this guy from stealing our sheep, we're just going to have to kill him. And I personally will put up $1,000 to defend any man who kills Erickson. Now, at this point, Winfield Lamb tells a story. He says, I have an idea about how we ought to kill Erickson. He says, there's a man over in Round Valley that's south of Weaverville near Covelo. The Round Valley Indian Reservation is there now. A man over in Round Valley. Now remember that name, Round Valley. He needed his neighbor killed, so what did he do? He waited until the middle of the night. He lit a big ball of hay on fire, and he ran up to the guy's front door, and he dropped this flaming hay on the front door. Just like kids with bags of shit on Halloween. So the guy, then he runs off. The guy opens his door to investigate. investigate like why there's a fire on his steps, and from the bushes across the yard, he gets sniped by the light of burning straw. So,
lamb chops, bitch.
So they all.
Good God.
Yeah, I know. All right. So they all agree that this is a great plan. They're like, yeah. Let's do the burning straw snipe thing. But then it's almost like a Monty Python sketch where somebody goes, "Wait a minute, it just rained." Like, it's muddy. If we do this now, we're good. Sorry, I'm going to stop with the accent. But they're like, if we do this now, it's going to leave boot prints in the mud, and we'll get caught. So they agree to adjourn on the murder plan until summer, when they won't leave tracks. Oh my gosh.
It doesn't rain in the summertime.
Yeah, exactly. So Erickson, who had been ran into jail originally back in June for the sheep shearing, he finally gets released at the beginning of January. His charges are dismissed and he gets released. Just 2 weeks later, Norris goes in to testify that Erickson's stealing his sheep, and Erickson is arrested again. Within 2 weeks after he's been in jail for June, July, August, September, October, like 9 months, he gets arrested again by this like mean girl cabal of sheep farmers, and he's back in jail. And as this second case grinds through the courts, again, it's starting to look like nothing's going to come of it. And Benjamin Arthur says, all right, that's it. We really are going to have to kill this. And in the newspaper in 1886, it was always blank, 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 blank. And I love to imagine like what swear words he uses. I mean, obviously, son of a bitch is probably the most likely. But I like to think he's like, we're going to have to kill this motherfucker. You know?
Although, if you're just going to keep getting him arrested, and at some point, if this dude's just getting arrested, wouldn't he just have a terrible record, and all somebody would have to do is just say, yeah, this guy's at it again, man.
Well, you'd think so, except every time he gets arrested, he doesn't even have to be found innocent. The charges are just dismissed. Like, I think in the modern era, what you would expect is that the cabal would end up getting arrested for filing false reports. I mean, in every case, Erickson is let go by the law and not even found innocent. Like, literally, the judge is like, this is horseshit, you're free. But this is after he's been moldering away in jail for however long it takes the 19th century court systems to get around to business. Just
stewing in there.
Pissed.
Just
right.
Every time, just angry.
Yeah, really, just growling like the Incredible Hulk as that berserker fury fuels his Viking veins, you know. By April of 1886, we're about 6 months out from his actual murder now. Arthur's assumption that, again, the law's not going to do anything proves true, and after spending another 10 months in jail, Erickson's released. And at this point, the Viking decides the turnabout is fair play. So about a month later, in 1886, he has John Norris, who had just thrown him in jail, arrested for sheep stealing. And Norris goes to jail. Which is what I said about anybody could say anything about anyone. And like they're like, well, I ain't calling you a liar. If you swear it's true, then I guess we got to arrest this guy. So Norris, he goes to jail for sheep stealing. He subpoenas his friends Arthur and Trogdon. They come in, they pay his bail. He's released, and his case is continued until the end of June. Ultimately, Norris is also found innocent and released and meets up with Kuntz, another George, in July, who tells him that he's hired our contract killer, George Orr, on a $500 contract to kill Erickson. So now they're going to do it. They've had enough with the inefficiencies of the legal system. They're going full vigilante, except sort of coward vigilante. They're just going to pay the money, not do the work themselves.
So I forget, did they know Orr? Orr was another sheep guy, wasn't he?
So Orr was an employee of Kuntz, who was a member of the cabal. And most of this story comes from the testimony of John Norris and George Orr. and their testimony is not exactly the same. So right now we're deep in mostly Norris's side of the story. We will get to what Orr has to say and how it differs from Norris, but he was an employee of Kuntz who had come to work for Kuntz, and essentially Kuntz had immediately started dropping these hints like, hey, you could make $500 if you kill Erickson.
So they weren't just they weren't just hanging around, and Orr happened to walk by, and he overheard them say, "Yeah, we need to kill this guy," and Orr's just like, "I'll fucking do it, shit."
Well, it's a little bit like that actually. And when you hear what Orr has to say and his recounting of events, it seems pretty clear that he was not very bright. And so I think Kuntz keyed in on that and was just kind of like, here's a patsy we can use, and if he gets caught, he gets caught. Who cares? He'll do it for the money. They've hired George Orr. Now then, there seems to be some sort of general hemming and hawing for a couple months, during which time Kuntz inserts himself as the middleman, saying, "You guys, I'm going to collect all the money for Orr, so you guys give me the money." So Benjamin Arthur gives Norris $125 to give to Kuntz, who's going to give it to Orr. If that sounds like an unnecessary game of telephone to you, it is, and we'll get to why. And it's basically agreed that each member of the cabal will give their portion of the bounty to Kuntz for Orr. Well, on September 7th, George Orr comes down the mountain where he's been with George Kuntz to announce to everybody, to George Trogdon and others, that, hey, he pounds his chest and he says, "I just killed George Erickson up the mountain path." And then he says, and this is hilarious because this is what he says. He says, "I'm leaving in 2 weeks. You better give me half the money by then. And then I'll be back in December, and you better give me the other half of the money then, because it won't look good if I take all the money now." Think about that one for a minute. Who is this genius contract killer? Yeah.
I'm coming back in December.
Yeah. First of all, yeah, he goes, "I just killed a man at your behest. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm leaving at the end of the month. So I'm going to hang around for another 2 or 3 weeks around the scene of the crime with my co-conspirators. That's step one." He says, "Then you just pay me half the money, and then you give me the other half 3 months from now when I come back to the scene of the crime." Because
yeah, that doesn't look suspicious. Not at all.
No.
Dude just leaves, then comes back.
And why? Right. Why won't it look good if he takes all the money now? Who besides himself and the other men who employed him to murder Erickson are going to know whether he takes half the money now or all the money now? I mean, what?
It's not like they had Venmo and it was a Venmo transaction that could be traced. You're like, hey,
yeah,
or
exactly.
paid him in check. Here, we'll write you a check.
Yeah,
Don't cash it for 3 weeks. And then when you come back in December, we're going to give you another check.
Yeah, right. I mean, gosh, what kind of murderer for hire requests a payment plan? He's like, no. Don't pay me in gold doubloons. You pay me some now. Yeah, you can, like you said, you can Venmo me a little bit later. We'll figure it out. Maybe send me some collectibles. Like,
you just give me the money and I'll leave and never come back. I'm sure I could. My services are, perfectly good some other place. I could shear sheep. That's fine. I can do that right. Anywhere.
And here we've arrived at the place where perhaps the facts diverge, because 2 different men testifying in court tell mostly the same story until right about now. So here's what happens. An outside private detective from San Francisco, I believe, his name's Lawson, and he comes into town to investigate Erickson's murder, and he basically ferrets out all these conspirators and he tosses them all into jail. And then he basically sits outside their cell kind of around the corner waiting for them to say something to incriminate themselves. And they don't, but listening to them talk, he gets the sense that this Orr, who's maybe not the brightest guy, might be the weak link in this conspiracy. So he tosses him in solitary in the hole for 2 days. And Orr basically breaks in the hole. And when he gets out, the detective takes him out for dinner and he's so grateful that he confesses to the detective, and this is basically this is his story. He says, "My name's George Orr from Humboldt and Trinity counties." He says, "I met Kuntz at a dance in February of 1886. He invited me to come out to his ranch, and I arrived in June. And then he told me that his hired man was going to quit, and I asked him if I could have the job. And Kuntz says, okay. So then I brought my wife to live with me at Kuntz's ranch, and I was working there as a ranch hand. Well, almost immediately, Kuntz starts sort of continually hinting, hey, you could make $500 if you kill this Erickson guy for us. And so by the beginning of July, I agreed to do it. So here's where things get a little weird. It appears that Kuntz falls in love with George Orr's wife, and he's seen making unseemly proposals to her. This comes out later. But while Orr is there working at Kuntz's ranch, Kuntz falls in love with his wife. At one point, Kuntz goes into Weaverville to attend to one of these Erickson trials that we've already talked about. And during that time, Orr says that he goes down into the Hetchicow Valley to get himself a girl, to get himself a prostitute. He takes one of Kuntz's horses and he goes to get a prostitute, but he doesn't. And when he gets back, his wife tells him, Kuntz is really mad at you for taking a horse. And he says, I told my wife to go to hell. And he said, I had the blues. I was depressed, and I decided I was going to quit. Now, why? Man's living with his wife, boss leaves, man gets depressed and goes to find a prostitute. Maybe, as the detective suspected, this indicates that, there was something going on between Kuntz and Orr's wife. And so Kuntz says, no, don't leave. I'll pay you $50 a month to stay. And finally, Orr relents and he decides to stay. And Kuntz says, oh, and by the way, you can make that $500 if you murder Erickson. And now we're back to around September 6th, right around the time of the murder that we just heard about. Except Orr has a different version of the story. He says that he was on his way to Trogdon's house when he saw Erickson loading up the sheep train, and he goes and he talks to the men and he discerns their route. And so the next day, the day Erickson was killed, Orr and Kuntz get up early and they go on a hunting trip up in the mountains off the Van Dusen River. And when they arrive at the first hunting cabin, Kuntz asked Orr for his boots. He says, hey, Orr, give me your boots. And Orr says, well, why should I give you my boots? And Kuntz says, well, I want to go up the mountain and start something. Why don't you stay here working, mending this fence? And by the way, if anybody comes by, you tell them that Kuntz went and started something. So Orr agrees, gives Kuntz his boots, and he takes Kuntz's shoes. So, you can probably see where this is going, right?
I'm still stuck on the fact that Orr couldn't find a prostitute.
Well, maybe
after
just
saying
realized
that's where he was going, and that's what he was going to do.
Oh, maybe he just realized he loved his wife and he thought better of it. Who knows? But so here we have Kuntz, who has reportedly fallen in love with Orr's wife, who they go up into the mountains tracking Erickson, and Kuntz says to Orr, hey, buddy, I'm going to go on a hike without you. Why don't you give me your boots? In other words, I'm going to frame you for murder and steal your wife. So, but Orr's like, okay, here's my boots. So Kuntz comes back in the evening and he says he's done well. And Orr says, well, what does that mean? He says, Kuntz doesn't answer what it means. He says, well, how do I look? Orr says, well, you look like you just killed a bear. And Kuntz says, oh, I didn't kill a bear. I killed Erickson. And he says, I pulled the trigger and the buck fell. So this was Tuesday. On Wednesday, Erickson's body is found. On Thursday, he's buried, and Kuntz attends the funeral. And that night, Kuntz goes to Orr, and this is Orr's story, and he says, hey, Orr, you got to get rid of those boots. They've found the nail marks, the boot tracks, so that they know it was your boots that killed Erickson. and or instead of being like, well, what did you leave my boot tracks around for? Goes, well, okay. And he goes and he buries his boots.
My God.
I know, right? So they all get run into jail. Norris and Orr both testify that Benjamin Arthur and Winfield Lamb had supplied the money to pay Orr, but that Kuntz had inserted himself as the middleman, and the money never went to Orr. Benjamin Arthur had given $125 in gold to Norris. Norris didn't give the money to Kuntz. He buried it in his barn. And on the stand, he says, and if you don't believe me, I can take you to the gold under this floorboard in my barn. So he does, and that lends an element of credence to his testimony. And then when Orr gives his admission after getting out of solitary, he offers to take the detective to his buried boots, which he does, and the boots are found. And you're just like, who are these idiots? And this comes back to the sheep farmers can't keep a secret, because Norris, in his testimony, makes a point of saying that he individually met with every member of the cabal, and they all discussed killing Erickson together. Some of them paid him. He was like, they basically finger everybody, and then they're like, oh yeah, and here's the murderer's boots, and here's the gold that was going to get paid to the murderer. Like, they're trying to make it just as easy as they can. Well, ultimately and sort of inexplicably, the cases against Norris, Orr, Trogdon, and Lamb are all dismissed. But Benjamin Arthur is jailed as the head of the cabal and the mastermind behind the conspiracy. And the authorities decide that it was, in fact, Kuntz who did the murdering, and they put him on trial for murder. And basically, the story of why Kuntz wanted to do the killing and took the money and tried to frame Orr by wearing his boots and all this stuff comes down to that he had fallen, as I had said, madly in love with Orr's wife, and his plan was to frame the husband and take all the bounty money and then flee the country with Orr's wife. That's what ended up coming out of all of these, like, you sheared my sheep and stole the fleece arrests.
Well, why didn't he just... This dude's already out wanting to go whoring. He stays for $50. Why didn't he just say, I'll pay you $50 and a prostitute, and if I can have your wife,
man,
and you can work here?
Oh my gosh, coulda, woulda, shoulda, right?
I mean, it just doesn't... I'm honestly shocked Orr could find the boots, too. I was really hoping you were going to tell me that Orr could not find the boots. I put them here, and what's with everybody burying everything?
Right, why not burn the boots, right? I mean, what... He's like, is he going to, like, make soup out of them later like some poor Russian peasant, you know?
Well, they buried the gold in the boots. Why didn't they just bury Erickson?
Yeah.
They're in the mountains.
Yeah. Well, I think there actually is an answer for that, which is that Kuntz's plan was to have Erickson be found along with Orr's boot tracks so that Orr could go down for the murder and Kuntz could run off with his wife. So I think that has a lot to do with why the tracks were recovered. But yes, if they had any level of intelligence, they would assume that, it's all going to lead back to all of them. And as you said, cover their damn tracks. So this case, though, it's not done being weird. As weird as it's been, it's not done. So as I mentioned, charges were dismissed sort of inexplicably against everybody except for Kuntz and Arthur. Arthur ultimately has his charges dismissed as well. Kuntz, on the other hand, he's convicted of murder and sentenced to be hanged. So it looks like, okay, justice for Erickson is to be done here. The actual killer is found guilty and he's sentenced to be hanged. Well, he is, but he appeals his case to the California Supreme Court. And who should his lawyer be but a man named Grove L. Johnson? Now, I know this is already a dense story, but I have to tell you a little bit about legendary, influential politician and attorney, Grove L. Johnson. He was, here are the highlights of Johnson's career. He was born in Syracuse, New York in 1841, admitted to the bar in 1862, served on the Board of School Commissioners until 1863 when he was accused of falsifying documents for multiple $250 promissory notes. In other words, he was passing fraudulent checks. So now he's a criminal, and he's unable to pay his debts, and so he flees to the Arizona territories, which, you know, in the 1860s, full-on Old West, no law at all. He just literally, he flees. He flees the law. While he's out in Arizona, his brother manages to get him a job as an Army quartermaster because, of course, you want a convicted fraudster being in charge of distributing supplies to your military men because nothing could go wrong with that. But he keeps that job until the end of the Civil War. Then, in 1865, he moves to Sacramento, starts a successful law practice, starts selling insurance, discharges his debts, and he becomes involved in Republican Party politics. In 1867, he runs as the National Union Party candidate for state auditor, where he's accused of adding names of non-existent people to the rolls. So, Tiger don't change his stripes. First, it's fake checks. Now it's fake voters. And he pleads no contest to voter fraud, and he withdraws. So after this embarrassment, he switches from he's already gone from the Republican Party to the National Union Party. Now he switches to the Democratic Party. He makes several unsuccessful runs for state senate. And then in 1871, he was again discovered to have tampered with ballots, basically filling in fake names and votes for himself. So the guy is just a con man and a crook. He loses. He becomes a Republican again. Finally elected to state legislature where he serves, and then he becomes a state senator, and then he becomes a delegate to the Republican convention, and ultimately a U.S. congressman.
This dude rocks.
Yeah. I mean, when people say that politicians are corrupt and self-interested and criminals and all this stuff, this guy was all of those things, known, convicted, pleaded no contest, and it didn't slow him down one bit. And he ends up winning a seat in the House of Representatives in 1894. So here in 1888, when Kuntz is appealing his court case, this is at the height of Grove L. Johnson's influence. And how does a backcountry, philandering sheep farmer, murdering a-hole end up with the man who may be the most influential, powerful attorney in California at the time, former state senator, future U.S. congressman, Grove L. Johnson, is representing him before the Supreme Court, where, after a 2-week trial, he is found innocent and all charges are dismissed. How the heck does the Weaverville sheep farmer get this kind of clout backing him up? Well, I said at the start of the story, Nick, I said, if you say to yourself, either everyone else is the asshole or I am, it's probably you. But it turns out Erickson may not have been an asshole at all. In fact, later historical research intimates that the trouble with Erickson was he was too honest. You see, do you remember a little ways back in the story when Winfield Lamb told his tale about a man from Round Valley who killed his neighbor by lighting a ball of straw on fire and then shooting him by the light of burning hay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there was a man at the time who was called the King of Round Valley. He was another George. His name was George H. White, and he was the wealthiest and most powerful cattle baron in the region. He was known to have the most palatial estate north of San Francisco. He went through this really messy divorce where he had to pay his ex-wife $100,000, which is close to $3 million in today's money. So he was a major mover and shaker. And what becomes clear, he was so powerful, I think, that the Winfield Lamb's obtuse reference to Round Valley was as close as the San Francisco Examiner was willing to get to actually implying that cattle baron, multi-bazillionaire, and what he really was the Don, the crime boss of Northern California, George H. White, was behind all of this. But indeed, he was. So here's what really happened. What really happened was that this cabal of sheep farmers were hatchet men for George H. White. And they were out there running roughshod over the Mad River district of Weaverville, stealing people's sheep, stealing people's lands, making them pay protection money, all the things we associate with organized crime. And the problem with Erickson, he was a Norwegian guy. He was a little stubborn. I'm a Norwegian guy myself. And he was very morally upright, and he was going to have nothing at all to do with these criminals. So they kept trying to bring him into the the sheep protection business. Oh my God! And he kept rebuffing them. And so first they tried to get him out of their way by having him arrested, and when that didn't work, finally mob boss George H. White had enough, and it was time to have Erickson killed.
So wait, the cattle baron was the head of the sheep cabal?
The cattle baron was the head of all crime in all of Northern California, all of the rural and semi-developed areas north of San Francisco. If you had some kind of a racket running, you answered to George H. White, who happened to also be one of the most powerful, wealthiest businessmen in California. He was a cattle baron, as I said, and he had massive amounts of political influence. I mean, it's not all that different than the story told in the book version of Mario Puzo's The Godfather. I mean, this guy owned judges, had the ability to get politicians elected because he was just orders of magnitude wealthier than everybody else. And yeah, if you wanted to run a racket in Northern California, and in the case of our sheep herders cabal, their racket was doing all the things that they accused George Erickson of, then you ultimately had to answer and pay fealty to George H. White. And, Erickson wanted nothing to do with it, and so they had him killed. But that is why, and it took me a while to uncover all of this, but I was like, how do all these guys who seem sort of dubiously intelligent and obviously guilty, how did they all have their cases dismissed? And then the one guy who definitely did it and was found guilty and sentenced to hang, he appealed to the Supreme Court and managed to be represented by the most powerful attorney at the time? Where do the connections? I grew up in the backcountry, man. I know some sheep farmers, and you don't tend to be juiced to the gills with friggin', whoever Johnny Cochran is today, in your corner when you're running sheep through the wilderness.
This is incredible.
So, yeah. It didn't sit right with me, so I kept looking and looking, and then I finally arrived at, everybody worked for Mr. George H. White out of Round Valley except for Erickson, and he was too virtuous to be allowed to live. The king of Round Valley, George H. White. Yet another George.
Unreal. This poor Swede. Or no, he's a Norwegian.
My gosh. Norwegian, yeah. Yeah, I know, right?
Why do tragic things always happen to Norwegians in the United States history?
Do they? Would you please tell me about that?
Well, you know what? Maybe it's not true. But
I know, but maybe it is.
I don't know. I mean, I think this just goes back to Hell on Wheels, which is my limit to this.
Well,
this has got to be that character's got to be based on some kind of stereotype. It just seems like in a bunch of old westerns, there's always some kind of poor immigrant that's just trying to make his way out in the West, and all of a sudden he just ends up getting run over because he's just not in the loop.
Yeah, that's the story of the contract killer and the sheep farmer. I'm going to turn it over to you, Nick, and have you tell our Kinda Murdery audience a little crazy story from your life. So Take it away for us.
This isn't really a murdery story, and it's not even in the back. It's not even in the back country, or it's not even a up north story. Though I am an up north guy, and the other guy that's involved in this is an up north guy. I'm from Cheboygan, Michigan, which is right below the Mackinac Bridge on the Straits of the Great Lakes, right there. And this kind of all starts there. And my buddy Kevin and I, my best friend, ended up going to the same university. And just to kind of tell you how we ended up in the situation we were in, we were good friends. I went there to play football, and he was
You were friends from high school?
Friends from high school.
High school buddies?
He was a really good guitar player, and I played drums for him a little bit. And he was a year behind me, and I went to Grand Valley, where I work now, to play football, and he followed to do what he was doing, and we kind of lost touch a little bit. And then in 2002, I had a really, really bad year. A lot of things really happened to me mentally, and I ended up quitting playing football, and that was basically my life at the time. And I needed to move out, and I needed a place to live because I was living with football players at the time. And Kevin was there, so Kevin and I got an apartment, and we moved downtown near Grand Rapids, or downtown in Grand Rapids. And
got it.
We're poor college kids still. I'm a junior. He's a junior and we lived in this.
And just so people can picture you a little bit, what position did you play on the football team?
I was an offensive tackle. So I was 6'4", and at the time probably 275.
Yeah, guys, Nick Viau is nobody you want to F with, because if he can't kick your ass with his bare feet, he's going to shoot you with a fucking longbow, so just keep that in mind.
Except I'm a gentle giant, really, and I'm naive enough to get myself into a lot of really interesting situations.
Good.
And I was more so then. So anyway, Kevin's there for me. We find an apartment complex, and we want to stay there. And what was great it was right behind a BioLife. This is one of these places, so we could go give plasma, get money for beer, get drunk. We were living the bachelor life, and it was pretty awesome. And this was right before
you were giving blood and plasma for beer money.
And then you just get drunk quicker, and the beer would go longer. And
my dad would always say when he gave blood at the fire department, it was great because he could go get a beer. He's a cheap drunk now.
Oh, absolutely, and we did. And this apartment complex was interesting. We had some interesting neighbors. It was just kind of it was a crazy time because we were both bachelors. We were both doing our thing, and he was working he was working at a golf course and getting up super early in the morning, and I was working some job too. I can't remember what I was doing, but I was getting up early too, and we'd stay up way too late and whatnot. And we lived in a bad enough area where you should lock your doors. I mean, we had already had somebody climb up onto our balcony and tear the door off and try to get into our house, but failed. And the front door was...
And this is Grand Rapids, Michigan.
This is Grand Rapids,
right?
Michigan. And you wouldn't think it was a bad area, but, there's some stupid stuff happens. Now, the quality of criminal in that area wasn't great. The door was unlocked when this dude climbed up and actually tried to tear the other deck door off. The front door was unlocked. He could have just broken in. But at that point, where I'm going with it is that Kevin was like, you need to start locking the door at night and when you leave, because we don't want all of our shit getting stolen. And I'm like, all right. So I didn't one night, and I went to bed after
probably because you'd just given plasma and knocked back a couple steel reserves, and you were shit-faced.
We were drinking that night, and I remember we stayed up way too late, and I remember going to bed. Well, at around probably 2-3 a.m., somebody came into my room and sat down next to the bed and was messing with my alarm clock. And I thought it was Kevin. I thought he'd gotten up to take a shower and then, for whatever reason, got confused in the dark and went into the wrong room, and he was getting ready to go to work. So this dude comes in, and he's naked, and he's playing with my alarm clock, and I'm like, Kevin, what the hell are you doing in my room?
Why are you ass naked sitting on my bed, bro?
So he turns around, and he, starts to try to get into bed, and I'm like, what are you doing, Kevin? And it's not Kevin. So Kevin
is this person saying anything? Like when
I said, what the hell are you doing? And jumped up, this naked guy goes, whoa, okay, and he goes, you know, we're like, I'm yelling at him, I'm like, get the hell out of my room right now, you know, I'm in my boxers, he's naked, I'm chasing him out of my room. Kevin, here's the ruckus.
And you're 6'5", 270 or something.
6'4", 270. And this guy was about Kevin's size. Kevin's like 5'10", very skinny, small little guy, wiry, and this guy was in between us. This guy was like probably. So
6 foot. Like, oh no, I just awakened the BFG, and he's angry.
That's not. Yeah, this dude was scared. So he comes running out. Now what Kevin sees, he comes into the hall as I'm chasing this naked man out of my room in my boxers. So you could tell where his mind's going. What's going on? Of course. What is Nick doing? So he comes out in his boxers and he's yelling at this guy, and I'm going, no. This dude was in my room, set my alarm clock, blah, 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 blah. So this guy like, he's ready to leave. We corner him and we're like, what the hell are you doing? And he goes, where am I? I'm like, you're at this apartment complex, you're whatever. This dude's bombed out of his mind. And he goes, well, what year is it? Like straight.
Oh my God! Like Kyle Reese from
straight up Kyle Reese Terminator 1. This guy like it was out of it, and we're like, dude, it's like, you know, whatever. It was 2003. We're like, it's 2003. What the hell are you on or whatever? And he's like, I don't know where I am. I thought this was your house. I thought that was my bed. Blah 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 blah. We're like, do you live here? And he's like, I don't know where I live. You know, and he's freaking out and. And we're like, well, Kevin's like, get the hell out of here. You know, and Kevin's in full rage mode now. I'm in full rage mode. We're trying to skate. He goes, well, I can't go out naked. Do you have any clothes? Oh. So Kevin goes, I'm not going to give you my goddamn clothes. And I'm like, well, I'm too big. You're not going to fit in my clothes. So
what did you give him, a towel?
Yes,
or like
he goes into the bathroom and he gets this shitty towel. Kevin had one towel. Gets it off the floor and throws it at the guy. The guy wraps the towel around himself. And then we push him out the door and he's like, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll never forget this. And, you know, like, you're whatever. And Kevin's like, and that's why you locked the fucking door. Well, we were in shock, too. Like, we were like, what is this even happening? Like, you know, and he goes, why was he in there? And I'm like, well, I thought he was you and all this other stuff. And he goes, why would I be in there? You know, he's freaking out at me. And, well, the funny thing is 2 days later, Kevin's doing laundry, and he goes, you'll never believe who I just saw. And I'm like, what? He goes, the naked guy that was in your room. He's upstairs. He's our neighbor. And dude,
so did he explain himself
dude
at
didn't
all?
remember anything. Didn't remember anything at all. So it was super awkward from then on doing laundry because that guy was there. And like,
oh my God.
And I had forgotten that story, but that was one of those things that is a situation where, you know, me thinking up north, like, we don't lock our doors, we don't do anything, I'm not worried about this, you know, blah 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 blah. And you get naked guy on cocaine in your bed at 3 a.m. when you don't lock doors.
Yeah, crack or PCP or something.
Yeah.
Holy smoke! That is amazing. That is an amazing story.
Yeah, my wife actually volunteers at a community center, and she's the aquatics coordinator there. And sometimes really weird things happen, especially in the bathroom. She comes home and she tells me the funniest stories. The other day she went in there, and somebody had gone to the bathroom, plugged it, and had written in feces on the inside of the bathroom stall of every single stall.
Oh, wow. Every single stall. Like, I got to write on every
stall,
page of my diary
one,
here.
Like, went back, dipped again, and then had to write more. And
oh, God.
Usually, you know, and it was just...
And what did he write?
It was words like, yes, no, just stuff like that. Just one word. Nothing profound, no messages. You know, just super cryptic stuff written in poop. Well, this is the best part, though, because my wife, listening to true crime, she's a huge true crime fan, said, yeah, and I named it. She goes, and I had the perfect name for him. And I'm like, well, what is it? She goes, yeah, we're calling him the Zodiac Pooper. Because they couldn't figure out what he was doing, and it's still a mystery. Nobody knows who it is.
Wow.
And now that got me thinking. So I used to be. That's not the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
Well, we need to hear the weirdest thing you've ever heard now, please.
Okay, well, I'm at when I was in a junior, senior in high school and first year of college, I was a night security guard at Cheboygan County Marina near the Straits.
So you're talking observe and report. You're Seth Rogen in observe and report. You've got a badge, but you've no gun, handcuffs, and a flashlight, and a healthy case of self-hatred, I imagine.
I basically I basically had to help the seasonal boaters, and I had to, every once in a while when somebody would dock at night, I would have to dock them and make sure they paid in the morning. I'd have to clean the bathrooms. I'd have to do all kinds of stuff. I had to do a lot of maintenance, make sure the office was, and then be on the radio every once in a while. But what I ended up doing is this was a perfect opportunity for me and whoever was working with me to play Twisted Metal 3, Super Smash Brothers, or whatever. So as soon as the boss would leave, we'd bring in our TV, we'd bring in all that stuff, and I would have people come over and we'd have these tournaments, and we'd play video games throughout, like all hours of the night. I wasn't a very good security guard.
So this job is actually way more fun than it looks on the surface, is what you're telling me.
Oh, yeah. It was
best
amazing.
job you've ever had? I mean...
Probably. I mean, I didn't like cleaning the bathrooms and stuff, but, you pretty much just brought in a hose and whatever.
Ever run into a Zodiac Pooper in Sheboygan?
Well, what happened?
Okay, go ahead.
This is interesting. So there was an adjacent dock on the marina where you had to go, you went around this berm, and there was another boat launch area where you actually launched the boats, and the public bathrooms were over there. Mm-hmm. And we'd have to sometimes clean the other bathrooms. And the worst bathroom on the face of the earth was the women's bathroom in that place. And I've heard this of women's bathrooms. I've heard this from quite a few people that when it's that time of the month, oof, some people do really crazy things with the disposable tampons and end up writing things. So we went in to clean this bathroom, and it was like a serial killer had been in there. Somebody had taken a tampon and written on everything that you could possibly write.
Like every available surface, the toilet, the mirror, the walls, everything.
Like a horror show. Yeah, the whole thing was covered. And that's what I immediately thought of, because that's the creepiest, weirdest thing ever.
And what sort of things were they writing? Like,
well, just stuff like, pentagrams and 666.
Oh shit! Like they were casting a fucking like shit demon spell, like right there. Like they were summoning dark forces through the sewer system. Like,
and then the usual bitch ass, a phone number, random phone number.
Please tell me you called the phone number written on the wall in menstrual blood in Cheboygan.
No, absolutely not.
I got another Trinity County Kinda Murdery tale of misbegotten gains, and this story first appeared in the Napa Valley Register on November 16th, I believe in 1888, regarding a stagecoach robbery that happened a week earlier. So here's the story of the Dunce Cap Bandit. Perry Davis is the driver of the Wells Fargo stage out of Weaverville, and he is driving across Trinity County and into Shasta County. So he's right about a mile outside of the Reading post office when a highwayman orders him to stop. He doesn't stop. He keeps driving. So at this point, he basically just passes the guy. And so he puts the guy behind him, which is probably not the best tactical plan. The guy says, "Stop or I'll shoot." Davis stops the stage. So the highwayman comes up. He's got his gun trained on the stage driver, who's sitting up front with a drummer, which apparently is a 19th century slang word for a salesman, because they go out to drum up revenue. And he says to both of them, "Get down, get down." And then he reaches into his saddlebags and pulls out 2 dunce caps. Like sit in the corner, wear the conical hat because you're an idiot in class. Yeah. Like a fucking honest to God dunce cap. And he hands, there's another passenger in the stage. He hands all 3 men dunce caps, and he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go stand over in front of the horse team, a ways off, and I want you to pull these dunce caps down over your eyes and blindfold yourselves. So they do. And the robber takes about $160 from the passengers, and he pulls out the Wells Fargo box and the mail bag. So he starts going through the mail when along comes a man named Wilson driving his own team of horses with his own buckboard, and he's on his way into Reading to visit the doctor. And there's a stagecoach stopped in the road, and these are old, narrow, probably dirt roads in the 1880s. There's not really enough space to flip a Yui or pass anybody, so he ends up stopping his team of horses right behind the stagecoach. And he's like, well, what's going on here? And here comes the bandit, and the bandit gets the gun on him, and he says, get down, reaches into his saddlebags, pulls out another dunce cap, gives it to the guy, says, pull this down over your eyes, and go stand with those guys over there.
Wouldn't a burlap sack be more efficient and easier?
Well, and maybe they were burlap sacks, but they are described specifically in the paper as dunce caps. Now, whether that's a little bit of yellow journalism or not, I don't know, but I'm going to go with it because I love the mental picture of these just like doofuses looking like dumbasses from third grade or some kind of just bewildered Ku Klux Klansman or something. So the robber takes Wilson's watch, and Wilson says, look, first of all, before I do this, I really need to get to the doctor, buddy. And he's like, I don't care. And he's like, and also, can I have my watch back? Like, my grandfather gave me that watch. Like, he hid that uncomfortable piece of metal up his ass for 5 years.
I thought the same thing, dude.
So the robber actually says, listen, buddy, if I get enough money on this job, maybe I'll give you your watch back. But in the meantime, cap it up and go hang out with those other 3 dudes over there. So Wilson sort of sighs deeply and follows instructions. Well, not long after that, along comes a man named John Craddock. Same damn thing happens to him. He sees a stagecoach and a buckboard stopped in the road. He pulls his own rig up. So what the heck's going on here? Here comes the bandit, puts the gun on him, tells him, get down, and reaches in his saddlebag, rips out a dunce cap.
So what's the dunce cap count here? You got like, what, 6?
We're up to, so now we're at 5 dunce caps. So at this point, he pulls out the mailbag, and he's not just looking for money. He starts reading the mail with evident interest, like somebody watching a soap opera. He's like, oh my gosh, no, Mary did not just say that to Jonathan. Oh, Lord. Like, he's basically getting his weeknight TV drama through the mailbag. And as this is happening, who should drive up singing a song out of her buggy but Miss Elijah Welsh, County Superintendent of Schools. She drives up behind Craddock's team. She sees this group of dunce-capped men huddling together some yards away, and she says, what in the world is going on now? Well, there's always been this sort of idea in the Old West of a large amount of gallantry towards women. So this is something of a gentleman robber, and I think that he doesn't want to upset the person of a lady in any way. And so he doesn't try to dunce cap her. He just says, ma'am, you park there behind Craddock's rig, and if you stay quiet this whole time, you're not going to get hurt. So she agrees.
I don't know. If I was her and I come rolling up and I got 5 people in dunce caps, this dude's going through the mail, I'd be like, this guy ain't doing shit. I'm just going to run.
Yeah, but I picture that they're on like kind of a narrow mountain road, so she can't flip a Yui because she's got a team of horses pulling a Cinderella buggy. There's no space to go around. I'm not an equine expert, but I don't think you can really have horses back your rig up. I think they pull. They can't really push and walk backwards. So I think in every case, and this is kind of the genius of the plan, These people were just kind of stuck where they were. He finishes going through the mail, pops open the strong box, gets $240 out of the Wells Fargo box, which puts his haul, I think, at about $400. And then he disappears over the edge of the road, and he's gone. And these men in their dunce caps, they stand there quietly for a little while. And then finally, Davis, the stagecoach driver, says, is that man gone? Nobody answers. And so he addresses Miss Eliza Welsh, and he says, is the man gone? And she says, well, a man just went over the edge of the hill a couple minutes ago. They all unmask. The salesman gets in the buggy with Welsh. The rest of them get in the stagecoach, and they all head back to town. And they go out looking for the highwayman, but as the paper puts it, by 9 p.m. tonight, no progress has been made, and they have very little chance of catching someone who is so old a hand at the trade of stage robbing. Oh, boy. So I love how the newspaper does just kind of a tip of the dunce cap to this genius gentleman robber.
This is unreal. This is like it started off with a bad joke, and it just hasn't gotten any better. This guy's a legend.
You'd think they would catch him, right? I mean, when the guy who goes into the general store and orders like 30 dunce caps to shove in his saddlebags, they'd be like, do you have a lot of bad kids at your school, or what's going on here, buddy?
I was going to say, did they just suspect the local school teacher, or what?
Ooh,
Maybe
teacher? Miss Welsh was behind all of this. Maybe that's why there was no outrages visited upon her person. She's the dunce cap hookup. I love the mental picture of a bunch of grown men cowering in a corner in dunce caps while this robber sort of enjoys other people's private letters out loud to himself.
What a freak.
I know. Well, he's a kinky guy. I mean, if the dunce cap highwayman shows up at your local orgy, you might just want to throw your pants on and skedaddle, you know?
I want to believe that he just sat them all down first and just went through the mail and just read everything right in front of them like that, and then corresponding with him going, oh, really? And then what happened? Getting all the dirt.
Right. I mean, right. I like that idea, too. Sort of like a book club is what you're saying. Like a book club. Like they all would kind of discuss.
Sir, can
their
we do
take
this again
on
next
it,
week?
You know?
That was the best short story ever.
I don't know. I don't know if it beats the Zodiac Pooper, the Tampon Witches, and the Kyle Reese from Terminator, but it's a fun one.
It's very true.
So for our listeners who may not know, what is traditional outdoors? You can tell us about the pod, but I think we also just kind of want to know, like, what does it mean to be a traditional outdoorsman as opposed to a non-traditional?
That's a good question. Traditional outdoors is basically the host of that is Steve Angel, and he's a good friend of mine. We met on Twitter years ago, and a few years ago, I was doing a music podcast, and I'm like, Steve, this is really good. I think you and we have some stories to tell, and I think you'd be a good host, and I think we should do a podcast too. And Steve and I had a connection with traditional archery and traditional bow hunting.
Traditional means you're not showing up with your AR-15. You've got a bow.
No, I'm not even showing up with a rifle or a shotgun. Yeah, I'm using a longbow.
So a longbow. That was going to be my next question, because I feel like if you're a real purist, if you've got some fancy compound bow, maybe you can trace it back to the Mongolian steppes or something. But really, you might still have sort of an unfair edge over the deer. But when you say, are you talking like British wave my two fingers at the fuckers, like a full-on like English longbow? Is that what we're working with here?
That is a British war bow, and those are made to do different things. We hunt with American flat bows, which are basically Native American designs.
Nick, this has been a blast. Everybody go check out, please subscribe and review. Check out Traditional Outdoors. It's a great podcast, even if you're not an outdoorsman. If you thought Nick was fun on my show, he's fun on his own show. You can believe it. Go check that out. Thank you for being here with us today. For Nick Viau, I'm Zevon Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.
Kinda Murdery, The Emerald Triangle, is created, researched, edited, produced, and hosted by Zevon Odelberg, with opening theme by Niall Madden and art by the Gin of Lang. Available now on all podcasting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe, review, and tell your friends. You can find us on social media at Kinda Murdery or email at kindamurdery@gmail.com.